Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 12th episode of Viral Banter, the Generation Liberty Forum show. We have had such an amazing response to this show, and the Generation Liberty team is so excited to bring you another episode. Today, we are joined by four amazing guests once again, but let's start off with a familiar face. You all know him and love him. Welcome, Luca, to the show.
G'day, Renee. Thanks for having me back on. Feels like a weekly thing now.
How are you feeling, Luca, today about the thought that you're going to have to be wearing a mask whenever you go outside as my fellow Melburnian?
Oh, look, I've always loved putting on my hoodie and dressing up as Kenny from South Park, so I don't think it's going to make too much of a difference. But should be. I'm not too excited about, having to converse with my eyes with people, which will be very strange.
Yeah, I had the problem where my nose is too small and close to my eyes. So when I pull the mask up to cover my nose, if I look down at all, I risk poking myself in the eye. So I need to get like a children's mask or something. I don't know. But the next guest on our show is my always insightful and always wonderful assistant at the office, Theodora Pantelich.
Hi, Renee. Good to see you again. Thank you for having me back on.
Lovely to see you again. And another familiar face to the show coming to us from the beautiful Illawarra, which is where I wish I was now. It's Boston Edwards.
Hi, Renee. Thanks for having me back on the show. It's actually quite hot here. So I'm in my shorts and my nice kimono and stuff like that. So
I am so jealous. I am in Melbourne and I have a hot water bottle on my lap right now because it is so cold here. But let's move on. And we are incredibly privileged today to have the policy director from the Australian Taxpayers Alliance. Please welcome for her first time on the show, Emilie Dye.
Hello, thank you so much for having me on. It's good to be here, and it's also good to be in Sydney where I don't have to wear masks out everywhere. Fingers crossed that doesn't change anytime soon.
Yeah, I am hoping that does not change for you guys any sooner than for my friends in New South Wales. And as our listeners may or may not know, the last episode of Viral Banter was a special live show at the Virtual Friedman Conference. Emilie, you were part of the team that put together the conference. Can you tell me what that was like and what kind of response that you've had to that conference so far?
Conference went really well. Super relieved. We had a lot of last minute changes. We were planning on doing everything at a studio in Melbourne. We were planning on flying to Melbourne and then doing the conference there. And then Dan Andrews locked down Melbourne because of coronavirus. So we had to scramble. We had volunteers coming out from everywhere last minute and supporting us. We had volunteers both in Melbourne and in Sydney. A lot of people from the IPA helped out, so very grateful. A lot of people from Liberal Democrats and the Young Liberals also helped out. And we made it happen. It was a long night, but good fun.
Yeah, I think it was an amazing experience, and it's so good to see the Liberty community in Australia pull together and pull off something like that. I think it was a world-class virtual conference and really showed what the ATA and the rest of the Liberty community in Australia can get done. Theodora, I know that you listened to a lot of the conference. Can you tell me some of your highlights?
Yeah, so this was actually my first ever Friedman Conference, and I absolutely loved every minute of it. The speakers were amazing. You can tell everyone is super passionate about all the issues. And for me, some of my highlights would probably be the session with Dave Rubin and Ayaan Hirsi Ali. I think Ayaan is just such an amazing woman. So that was a great experience. But I think also just pretty much all of the sessions were interesting and like challenged my views in some way. So it's really a great chance to learn from people and people who really care about issues and to hear opinions that I don't normally hear at university, for example. So yeah, it was a really great experience.
Yeah, that's really good to hear from you, Theodora, because I've been going to the Friedman Conference for multiple years right now. And I know for me as a young person, it played a huge role in shaping my views and helping me come to terms with certain ideologies and what I really thought on really important issues. And I remember changing my mind multiple times when I visited Friedman and coming back with a completely different worldview. So I think it's really great that you still got to get that experience in a virtual form. And I think that's really important work. But the Friedman Conference was, again, this amazing celebration and achievement in Australia right now. But on a sadder note, as many of you may know, there was a ruling made yesterday that was a massive blow against freedom of speech and academic freedom in this country. This was the judgment in the case of James Cook University versus Peter Ridd, in which the Federal Court of Australia overturned the earlier decision of the Federal Circuit Court, which held that Peter Ridd was unlawfully dismissed by James Cook University. For those of you that may not know the background of this case, Theodora, can you give us a brief summary?
Yeah, absolutely. So for anyone who might not have heard of Peter Ridd, he's a highly respected marine physicist from Queensland, and he was a professor at James Cook University for almost 30 years, I think, until in 2018, the university sacked him for some very spurious reasons. So they claimed that he had somehow violated university policy by questioning the lack of quality assurance and the misleading and often inaccurate Great Barrier Reef research being produced by the university. And this is, of course, ridiculous because in the scientific world, testing and replicating and confirming research is key. So to call out bad science is, one would assume, integral to Peter's job. So the case went to court, and last September, the Federal Circuit Court ordered JCU to pay more than $1.2 million in damages and penalties because they found that the university had unlawfully contravened its enterprise agreement by censuring and sacking the professor. So, and if you're interested in getting more into the details of the case, I'd highly recommend the IPA podcast, The Heretic, to our viewers, which covers the story from start to finish. But unfortunately, this new development has occurred, which is that JCU yesterday won their appeal against the ruling in Peter's favor. So this is a huge blow to him and to the many Australians who have supported him and followed him in his campaign for academic freedom. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens next.
Yeah, it is a really, really unfortunate result. And I know that everyone at the Generation Liberty team and at the IPA is astounded with what has gone on. Emilie, I would like to hear your thoughts on this judgment.
Yes, this is a huge blow to freedom of speech. Taking it from the taxpayer's perspective, as I often do, I think we should note that this is a publicly funded university. They received taxpayer dollars. So they're supposed to be presenting the unbiased viewpoint. And they clearly didn't in this case. The professor came out against a lot of the dramatization of climate change, which we've all seen in the media. It's one thing if a private university is doing that. It's one thing if a private university fires a professor because that professor doesn't align with the worldview of the university. But government-funded entities are not supposed to have a set worldview. We're spending our taxpayer dollars in order to fund these universities so they'll give us the unbiased perspective, and they've got a very clear bias, and they're very clearly shutting down a certain worldview, which is very concerning.
Luca, does this result make you worry about free speech on Australian campuses, and do you think it could possibly scare other academics and even students away from speaking out in the future?
Oh, definitely. I mean, as coming at it from a different perspective to what Emilie did. She came at it from the taxpayer's perspective. As a student, I'm going to come at it from the student's perspective, right? I want to be able to trust my professors to tell me the truth, right? I want to be able to trust my professors and my lecturers and my tutors to tell me the truth, even if it doesn't necessarily agree with my viewpoint, right? The problem is that now this is being undermined, this almost trust relationship between student and professor, and indeed between taxpayer and university, right? Where now the truth is subject to, as Emilie was kind of touching on, is subject to the whims and subject to the whims of the people who work at the university, right? It's like truth is now not good enough. Truth is not the aim anymore. Now the aim is perspective and indoctrinating people to a specific opinion by locking them into that box. And that's completely insane. I think it's completely insane. And what it means is that, yes, students will not feel comfortable going onto their campus and having open debates. Open debates will be a thing of the past if they weren't already, right? And professors will be afraid to speak the truth, because look what happened to Peter Id. Now he's gone to one of the highest courts. The next court is going to be, I think, the High Court, right? So at this point, we're really reaching the top levels of Australian law, right? And there's still questions about whether or not freedom of speech, fundamentally, whether or not academic freedom is allowed on our campuses, which to me shouldn't be a question in the first place.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there, Luca. Boston, do you find that Luca is echoing a lot of the things that you find happening on campus and a lot of the worries that you have, that your professors aren't really telling you the truth, or that they feel like they can't say what they actually think, and that students are feeling that same kind of culture of suppression and feeling that they can't speak what they actually think?
Almost definitely. I have students coming to me all the time saying, oh, we were in class and this happened and I couldn't speak up because I didn't want to get demonized in the classroom. And I come from a perspective where I don't care what other people think of what I say, and I'll just say it. And I also have students coming up to me in those classes saying, thank you for saying what you said. We didn't have the courage to say that. So we're looking at universities where we should be challenged about our ideas of the world. And yet all these students, they're scared. They're scared to say what they truly think because they feel like they're going to be punished somehow. And it's because these unis who are getting paid by a taxpayer and by our HEX money are listening to a small minority of far left regressive individuals who think that their view is better than everyone else's view in the world and that everyone should shut up. So yes, I think people at uni are scared to say what they feel.
Yeah, I really think that there is that is what's happening right now on campus, and it is really worrying, but it's also inspiring from Peter Rid. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I've talked to him multiple times, and he is the most lovely man. And he said to me in kind of his own words that the reason he was doing this was because the research that was coming out of JCU was affecting real jobs in Queensland. And if that research is going to be affecting people's livelihoods, it should be tested. But also, there is going to be so many cases of young academics who don't have the platform or don't have the ability to go to court, who don't have the savings built up for them to risk their livelihoods, who have simply slipped into the background and not spoken up because it was too hard. And he felt that he had to speak up so that in the future, those young academics didn't have to suffer that. So I think that's really amazing and brave and courageous of him to do this. But if you read the judgment that has been made public now, and it makes for interesting reading, if not slightly nauseating reading, particularly paragraph 94, which reads, "There is little to be gained in resorting to historical concepts and definitions of academic freedom. Whatever the concept once met, it has evolved to take into account contemporary circumstances which present a challenge to, including internet, social media, and trolling, none of which inform the views of persons John Locke, Isaiah Berlin, and others who have written on this topic." And it goes on to talk about challenges in the academic field, such as safe spaces and social media, which apparently should change our definition of what academic freedom is going into the future. Luca, what are your thoughts on this statement?
Look, I think that what the court's done here is pretty insane, and I'll go into a bit of detail because elsewhere in the judgment, he says, for example, all of these historical concepts are purely of historical interest. They have no other meaning, right? And it seems to be that the distinction that the court is making is that, well, in the past, academic freedom was to protect against institutional abuse, right? Against institutions like the church or things like that. Right. And now this has evolved because now we live in the age of the internet, which, as they say, J.S. Mill, John Locke, Isaiah Berlin didn't have to worry about. To me, that's an arbitrary distinction. To me, that's a completely arbitrary distinction, because academic freedom was about protecting, not just protecting professors, not just about protecting university. It was about protecting truth and the free exchange of truth, no matter what challenges faced it, whether it be institutional. I mean, Galileo Galilei, oh God, he did this terrible thing where he said that the earth wasn't the center of the universe, right? He had the weight of the Catholic Church on him, one of the most powerful institutions in history. He had that weight on him because he dared to say that the earth was what revolved around the sun, not the other way around, right? Compare that to a couple of Twitter trolls, and you see how absurd it is, right? Because like, oh, you know, he had to deal with complete public meltdown because of what he said, but these professors have to deal with a couple of trolls on Twitter and on 4chan. Like, there is no comparison, right? And it's and coming back to the main point, even if, okay, maybe it's a problem that there are trolls online, sure, just turn off Twitter. Who would have thought, right? But even if that is a serious issue, right? Which, yeah, bullying is an issue, right? Academic freedom wasn't just about protection against institutions. It was about protection of truth against any challenge that comes before it, whether it's institutional, whether it's a couple of trolls on Twitter, or whether it's a couple of fascists going around tearing down statues, right? It's about the protection of truth. So to draw this arbitrary distinction that says, oh, well, academic freedom has changed now because we need safe spaces, what the parameters of and challenges to academic freedom often leaves us in uncharted territory in the modern day, right? This is an uncharted territory. There has always been challenges against truth and against the freedom to express truth. And whether that comes from a couple of Twitter trolls or an institution, it needs to be protected through academic freedom. So I think the reasoning behind this is completely dodgy because it's drawing an arbitrary distinction between the medium through which academic freedom is suppressed, not the suppression itself.
Yeah, I really admire your passion there, and I can see how much this is affecting students on campus, and I totally and 100% agree with you. And it astounds me that that kind of reasoning was in the judgment, and that they were even bringing up concepts like safe spaces and social media in relevance to this. It just seems so bizarre to me. Theodora, what are your thoughts on this kind of these kind of terms and ideas being brought into a case about academic freedom?
Yeah, look, to be quite frank, I think this particular part of the judgment is just a load of garbage. And I agree 100% with Luca. Academic freedom, quite simply, has not changed because of the new challenges of the internet and whatever. And academic freedom is certainly not less important because of these developments. And I think to pretend that we have to revise the role of academic freedom to fit modern day standards is as bad as when, for example, American leftists complain that the First and Second Amendments somehow aren't applicable to the modern day because they were written for the time. I mean, it's simply not true. Like, academic freedom simply means having the right to express one's own opinion and having the right to be able to criticize the opinions and research of others. And in my personal experience, I've seen way too many of my uni teachers choosing to err on the side of caution when they approach controversial topics because they don't want to step on anyone's toes. So this kind of thing in this ruling, it's certainly going to discourage even more academics from speaking out when they see misleading and poor quality research in their fields, and that's a massive shame. And I think if we can't agree that academic freedom is a universal and a timeless concept that we should treasure, then universities are basically past the point of no return.
Yeah, it is, again, incredibly concerning. Emilie, you are from the US, and cancel culture on campus, there seems to be a really major issue, and it seems to be even worse looking from afar from Australia. Can you tell us from your experience the difference between what you've seen going on there and what's going on in Australia? Or do you think we're just, not as far along on the path?
I think I was very blessed because I got an economics degree, and the economics departments in the US, or at least at my university, were very focused on let's look at the data, let's look at the theory, and let's see what that leads us to, and less pressing a certain worldview on the data and the information that's coming in. I feel like a lot of these trends have become more of a thing in the last 4 or 5 years. When I first started, I think I was a freshman, they had a talk on intersectionality. It was the first time I'd ever heard the word before. And the talk was like, what is intersectionality? Let's talk about this. And it was all about race. And they made the mistake of giving me the microphone. And it's like, there is so much more to diversity than merely skin color. One of the gals had a Chinese American student who said, I'm not privileged, I'm just really blessed that I've gotten here, gotten to this country, have this family, I'm just blessed. And I was like, that's a good perspective to have. We need to look at a lot more than just like the narrow lens of race issues. But towards the end, and after that talk, after I'd spoken up and made quite a few people very upset, was not a safe space. I had a lot of professors come up to me afterwards and say, thank you for what you said. Thank you for acknowledging that our school isn't racist, this program that I'm in isn't racist because we only have one Black person. We picked a very diverse group of students. And so they thanked me, and they thanked me for really calling out intersectionality for its very narrow worldview. 4 years later, was a senior, and they were on campus, they had a vote about getting rid of our mascot. So I went to George Washington University. Our mascot is the Colonials. George Washington was, so it was like, we had a big George Washington puppet that would run around as a mascot, and it was the Colonials. It was Go Colonials. And people got outraged by this. Like, you do realize, like, we were the colonies. We weren't the colonizer. George Washington fought for our freedom from a colonial power. And obviously you have a different perspective from Australia on that. But there was that big push to get rid of our mascot. And I found that a huge change. And then having graduated, I saw lots of cases of speakers coming onto campus and not being able to speak because students were outraged about their different worldview. So I think it's been a similar trend. It's been a downward trend in the US from when I first started uni to when I finished. And then coming to Australia, I've seen a lot of those really negative trends. Hearing things from my interns about their experiences at uni, I've been horrified. One of my interns was called out by her school newspaper for her worldview, and by name, and called rude names, and just because she had a conservative worldview. And I don't think that would have happened at my university, at least not when I was there. So I think it's more of a universal trend, and something that we've seen more over the last 5 years. I've been really horrified by Australia's universities in that way.
Yeah, I think you're right about it getting worse, particularly in the last 5 years. When I did my undergraduate degree at Wollongong University, that's also maybe because it was a regional university, politics didn't come up that much. It wasn't forced into every subject. I was doing a graphic design degree. There was a couple of times they shoved Marxism in there, but it didn't feel as bad as when I went to Sydney University to do my master's about 4 years later. Just felt like a completely different culture on campus. Everything was looked at through either identity politics, everything was political, everything you had to be careful about what you said, not that I was, but it was a complete shift, and it was really worrying. Boston, you're at Wollongong University right now. Have you noticed a shift from when you started your degree till now?
Oh, most definitely. Considering that I started before they brought the Ramsay Centre to Wollongong, and until after they brought the Ramsay Centre to Wollongong, the presence of people who think that their worldview is the only worldview that should be taught at university has grown. And it's kind of scary. Like, they say that sticks and stones may break my bones, but now words do hurt them. They don't want to hear different perspectives on campus. And I want to shout out and try and cancel everything on campus nowadays that reeks of anything that doesn't suit their personal worldview. So I think, yes, I can see it happening more and more on campus, because I used to say, you know this, Renee, that, Wollongong isn't really political. Like, there's not that many, like, you go to class and it's not really that political. No one really wants to talk about politics because most people just want to be there for uni. But now there's this small group of people on campus who are pushing this ideology, pushing. And it's making people, like, in a good way or a bad way, having to talk about politics. And like, we should be going to uni. Most people want to go to uni just to study and learn what they want and get a career out of it. They don't want to hear this political stuff all the time. Not even I do. Like, I'm sick of politics half the time.
Yeah, I totally agree. It can get really, really tiring day to day. But after hearing that kind of, little bit of doom and gloom about Australian universities, I am seeing, especially from the Generation Liberty perspective, a lot of young people who do have passion and who are standing out, including everyone that's here, including everyone that's a coordinator across the campuses in Australia that a Generation Liberty is at, including work by groups like SFL and other student organisations that are really fighting back. And I really feel that my message to young people is, you may feel like you can't speak out, but please do, because you do not know how many other young people in that classroom feel exactly the same way that you do. And by you saying something, you're giving permission for them to say something. And it's also how you make some of your best friends. When I was at university, I was one of the loudmouths in class, and I made all my best friends by them approaching me after class and saying, thank you for saying that. I agree with you. And that's how you find other people who will think what you're thinking, so you don't feel like you're alone on campus. But the Peter Ridd case may not be over. Peter now has to look into his legal options and decide whether he will push to the High Court. This is, of course, 100% up to him, and it is going to be a difficult thing if he chooses to do this. But if he decides to push forward, the IPA and the Generation Liberty team and thousands of average Australians are going to be behind him, because average Australians know that this is important and that we need truth on our campuses, and we need people to speak up and challenge orthodoxies. But to liven up the show a little bit and move on, after the success of last week's segment, The Price is Right with government spending, I have decided to bring it back. So this is The Price is Right, but with our taxpayer dollars. As at Generation Liberty, we love our freedom. We always think it's important to check in on how the government is spending our taxpayer money. So our first question up, so this is closest to the answer without going over gets the point. And whoever wins the glory of winning this competition. So the first question is, how much did the 2020 COVID safe application cost?
$2 million.
Okay, Boston in with 2 million. Emilie, what would you estimate?
I'm going to add an extra zero to that and say 20 million.
Okay, Theodora?
I think initially, so the initial cost, Boston might be right on that, but with like advertising and stuff.
I just want the application, purely.
Okay. Maybe like 3 million-ish. I don't know.
Okay, and Luca, how much do you think the application itself cost?
It's such a wide spread. Let's go with a solid. I might guess a solid 8 mil.
Okay, so going into the first round, Theodora gets the points because it cost 6 million. But a follow-up question to that is, how much did the government spend on advertising this application? I will tell you, it's a lot more than the original cost of the application itself. So whoever wants to buzz in first with their guess?
I'm going to keep my guess the same. I'm going to keep it at 20 million.
Okay. Emilie's locked in 20. Luca?
Ooh, again, this is tough. Let's go with a solid 22 million.
Okay. And Theodora?
15 million. I have no idea.
And Boston?
Around 18.5 million, I reckon.
Okay. And going into the second round, Luca has got a point because none of you got that close. It was $64 million.
Oh.
$64 million.
Wow.
I'm not pessimistic enough about the problem. Damn. As Jordan Peterson likes to say.
The app doesn't even work, apparently. Like, no one ever gets into messages about, oh, you've been at a hotspot or anything. It doesn't even work.
Yeah.
Yep. Good spending of our taxpayer dollar there.
Great.
So so this is one more about the cost of government regulations. So how much does red tape cost the Australian economy every year, according to IPA research?
Can I go?
Theodora? Oh, she should know this because she works in the office.
I know. I think I was reading about this recently, and it was I think it's 175 billion.
Okay. Theodora's looking at 175 billion. Emilie?
I also feel like I should know this, and I know I've read it somewhere. Well, I've read it from you guys, but I can't remember the number off the top of my head. I know it's in the billions. I'm going to go with 225 billion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, 225 billion, sorry.
225 billion.
Yeah, I said that wrong, and then I realized.
And Boston, how much do you think it costs?
I think Theodora's pretty close, so I'm going to go a little bit lower because I'm an optimist and I hope that the government isn't spending as much money on, well, wasting much money. So I say 155 billion.
Okay. And Luca?
Okay, yeah, look, I'm pretty pessimistic, but I don't think I'm as pessimistic as Emilie is. So I'm going to go with a solid 180 billion.
Well, you are very close, Luca, but you did go over. Theodora,
Oh.
You get the points. It is
Yay.
176 billion. So
Good work.
that was a very, very good guess, and very good to see that you're reading your IPA research. So
Of course, always.
our last question is, I don't know how to pronounce this council's name, so apologies if I get it wrong, but the Baranold Shire, which was a council, this year passed a pedestal tax requiring businesses to pay a tax for every toilet over 2 toilets. How much was this toilet tax? So,
What?
I'll go last on this one.
okay, we'll go with Theodora.
Per toilet.
So you have to pay a tax per toilet
Okay.
once you've gone over 2 toilets. How much did they charge businesses to install extra toilets?
I mean, I'd imagine I hope this is the least expensive one that we've had so far. So, maybe like $1,000 per toilet.
Okay, Theodora's looking in 1,000. Boston?
I say it's much more. I'm going to, because I know that councils are always wanting to try and get more money. I say it's about 5,000.
Okay. And Luca, how much do you think they're charging businesses to install toilets in this shire?
$5,000 per toilet would be like 5 times more than the actual toilet. And that toilet better be washing out everything afterwards. Like, geez, full functionality over here. Come on. I'm not gonna say that that's, yeah, councils can be pretty bad, but surely not this bad. I have hope. I know I said I need to be more pessimistic, but I have hope. I'm gonna say a solid $150.
Okay. And Emilie?
$100 per toilet.
And Emilie has got that right. The ATA did cover this story, so she had a slight advantage. But yes, they were charging businesses $100 per extra toilet that they installed. It was literally a toilet tax.
Yep. And the real problem with this one, just to add quickly, if you have a hotel, that can easily add up to tens of $1,000s a year on toilets.
Well, so it's per year, so it's not even like one-off payment of building a toilet.
Well, this is the first time they've instituted, so it was going to be a one-off, but it's a one-off at this point, and we'll see if they keep it and make it annual.
Yeah, that is a really silly tax from my perspective, but that is the last question. And that means that this week, Theodora is the champion.
Yay. Finally.
Congrats.
And that was definitely a nail-biting finish. I would love to thank my amazing guests for this 12th episode of Viral Banter. Luca, Boston, Emilie, and Theodora, thank you for your amazing contributions and this wonderful discussion. If you are not a member of Generation Liberty yet, you can now join at generationliberty.org.au for only $10. You will get an awesome welcome pack, including a free book, stickers, and lots of fun other stuff. But also, Emilie, can you please tell our audience about the ATA, the amazing work that you're doing, and how our audience can get involved and support the work that you're doing as well?
Yes, absolutely. The Australian Taxpayers Alliance is a grassroots advocacy organization funded by thousands of Australians in every state. And we focus primarily on lowering taxes, putting forward only common sense regulations, because regulation costs the economy billions of dollars every year, and getting rid of government waste wherever we can. And how you can get involved and how you can find out about us, our website, just look up Australian Taxpayers Alliance and you'll find us. And we have a membership starting at, I think the first monthly membership is $10 a month, and it goes up from there. And you will also get a welcome packet with great taxpayer swag. I think there's a good notebook as well that I love and use all the time. So that's how you get involved. And thank you so much for having me on. It's been great.
No worries, Emilie. It was an absolute privilege to have you on, and we are sure to have you again on in the future on Viral Banter. But until the next episode, thank you to everyone for listening, and make sure that you stay safe, stay happy, and stay free.